This is the Conservative American Message, hosted by the one, the only, Cam Lau. Today is March 24th, 2025, and it is National Cocktail Day. Our quote of the week comes from Albert Einstein. He said, "The hardest thing to understand in the world is the income tax." Before I bless you with my political insights, I have to have you pay for it. This podcast is presented weekly, free to you, and all I ask is that you give me a 5-star rating wherever you listen, and also that you follow me on Instagram and Facebook at The Conservative American Message. That's your ticket to admission for today. Also, please don't forget to check out our new blog. I've been posting quite a bit on there of extra content for you, so if you want to check that out at campodcast.square.site, or just click the link in the description of this episode. Donald Trump has got a really ambitious agenda that he has set forth for this presidency. He made so many promises on the campaign trail, it's going to be hard to deliver on them all. I have no doubt he's going to try his best, but we know that some of these things he said are just not going to happen unless he really kicks Republicans into gear. One of these aims is that he wants to eliminate income taxes, or more specifically, recently he said he's going to eliminate income taxes for people making less than $150,000 a year. That might sound like a very bipartisan idea because Republicans hate all taxes, and Democrats just want the rich people to pay all the taxes. So that should work for everybody, right? $150,000, that's got to be rich people. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think there's any dual income households in 2025, or very few, that are making less than $150,000 on two incomes. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to be an individual income at $150,000 or a household, or your tax household basically. Because otherwise you're talking about a lot of people paying taxes and disincentivizing people from having that second income because they're just going to have to pay taxes. I'm also kind of worried about this whole idea of not paying a tax at all. It sounds great. Yeah, I get to keep my money, but then how am I supposed to have any say in what the government's doing? Of course, under our Constitution and the way that the United States works, we all have a voice. We all have our rights to vote and to speak our mind, but there was a time when the only people who were allowed to vote were those who owned property, because at that time, most of the revenue came from property taxes. So if you didn't own property and didn't pay into the system, why should you be given a vote? Now, we can debate whether that was right or wrong, and I think it's probably a good thing that the United States now just recognizes that all of its citizens have a right to vote. But when you look at why we left Great Britain, because we had taxation without representation, and you flip that on its head, and now we're going to have representation without taxation. Well, if you look at the lobbyists who are paying these politicians today, those are the ones who get to make the decisions, not us voters, because we don't contribute enough to those politicians' pockets. If we're not even paying taxes at all, how are they going to view us as the voter, as their constituency? Because we really don't have any input into the system other than our vote. Now, I don't think income taxes are right at all. I think we should completely abandon them for people regardless of their income. I also think it's discriminatory to give people different tax rates or no taxes at all based on a certain income level. And that's what we're doing right now. I didn't look up the number before I started this, but there's a certain level that you don't pay taxes. The so-called poor don't pay any income taxes if they make under that certain income level. And by the time you add in child credits and student credits and all the different deductions you can take, there's a lot of people who don't pay any income taxes in this country, especially in the lower income levels. So when you want to talk about the rich versus the poor and who pays the most tax, the rich are absolutely paying the most taxes. Yes, they can get by for several years without having any actual taxable income, but eventually they have to sell their stock or take a capital gain at some point to bring in some money, and then they pay huge amounts of taxes. You know, where our revenue is coming from today is mostly from that income tax. We can't rely on property taxes and sales taxes at the current rates that they're at today. Donald Trump has talked a lot about tariffs, which would essentially be a form of a sales tax. Yes, you're having it be paid somewhat through a foreign government or foreign companies anyway, coming into the United States that we talked about last week when we did our tariff episode. But really, the consumers in the United States are the ones that will face those costs. So it's really a sales tax. The current tariffs that Trump's proposed would maybe make up for about a fourth of the loss of revenue if he went forward with this plan of not taxing the income of those making under $150,000. That's according to some liberal economists. Who knows if that's really true? But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're right. So he's going to make up a fourth of that revenue. Now, I think tariffs are good, but they're not going to be enough to do this. A better system overall would just be to entirely eliminate income taxes for any tax bracket, any income level, and just impose a federal sales tax, which certain more libertarian Republicans in Congress have proposed many times. But before we get into all that, what is so bad about income taxes? Yeah, we say taxation is theft, but what does that really mean? Obviously, we still need some type of taxation to pay for schools and roads and fire departments and those essential things. You can argue about which ones of them are essential or not, but we all know we need a road. We got to have somewhere to drive, and there's no way the private sector can provide roads to us at a better value than the government, even if they have a hard time keeping them in good repair. The problem with the income tax is that it's a so-called progressive tax, which is just a fancy label that the liberals have put on it. Really what it means is that the more money you make, the higher that income is, the more percentage of your money we're going to take from you. So all this does is disincentivize income. It disincentivizes working. If I get a raise at work and that bumps me into another tax bracket and I now pay more taxes, I could end up with less money than before I had that raise. Not to mention people who are on different government programs of welfare and food stamps that they don't want to allow their income to get past a certain level, and who can blame them, really? I mean, if they're feeding their family because of those programs, why would they want to take a higher income and end up with less money for their family overall? It's a screwed up system, and the income taxes is where it starts. Not only do you disincentivize working, but you're also disincentivizing saving and investing. If people had their full income and the only tax they paid was on the money they spent through a federal sales tax that we're going to talk about, then saving your money, you'd pay no taxes. Investing your money and making gains on those investments, there would be no taxes. So it would definitely boost the stock market. It would boost everybody's savings. You wouldn't see this massive consumer debt because that consumer spending is going to be taxed at a higher rate. It's also much more fair and just transparent. I mean, you can see what your tax liability is on every purchase. Not, I make this amount of money, now I'm going to go pay some guy a couple $100 to figure out how I can get out of some of that, and then I pay my tax. And you have to hire somebody just to figure out how to do that. And that's another problem. You have this massive industry of tax preparation that you're going to not have a need for anymore. There's always going to be a need for accountants. There have been for centuries, for thousands of years, they've had accountants. But this tax preparation scheme that's going on, there's no need to have that many jobs that just focus on getting you to pay the right amount of tax. It should be self-explanatory, transparent. This is the tax. When I buy something, it's this percentage, and this is what I'm paying, and it's done. It's gone. I don't overpay. I don't underpay. There's no refunds. There's no paying into the IRS. It's a one-and-done deal. It's consumption-based taxation. And that means that I, as the consumer, get to decide what I pay in taxes. If I want to buy something or not. It's my choice what my tax burden is. And you can't have tax evasion when the tax is paid at the point of sale of the business. You won't have these people getting arrested and filling up our jails because they don't pay taxes, because it'll be unavoidable. Unless the business somehow avoids the taxes, but why, that's going to be a lot less common than the people, and not just evasion. I mean, you also have people who just can't afford to pay their taxes, especially a lot of 1099 employees that they're paying back taxes years and years and have IRS debt. Well, that means that the federal government isn't getting that revenue that they need to operate. So I think that you're going to eliminate so many problems just by having a straight federal sales tax that is so-called regressive by the liberals because it disproportionately affects poor people. Well, that's not true at all. In fact, this would be a fairer distribution of wealth because the rich people spend more money. They consume more. That consumption is going to be taxed higher than the so-called poor people who only pay for their basic living expenses. They won't pay as much in taxes. So I guess it really is a progressive system in that way. You also have a massive burden placed on businesses that have employees who have to either do it in-house or hiring somebody out to do all these payroll taxes. You have Social Security and Medicaid, and then all of your federal and state withholdings that they have to take out. That is a huge, huge expense. And by eliminating that, you would open up companies to having more funds, more positions available in actual value-creating jobs. The more money a business has, the more jobs it's going to create, because as it grows, it needs more employees. Not payroll HR employees, but actual value-creating employees. You also would not have as many IRS employees needed. I mean, the cost and the intrusiveness of an audit and the amount of people at the IRS that have to be employed and involved in all of those processes, eliminated. It's done. That's further helping us on our federal budget problem of how many tax dollars we need. And so you're going to eliminate all these jobs, which Trump is already, I mean, he's eliminated so many jobs already and saved so much of those tax dollars that when you look at when we go back to a fourth of our income taxes being covered by the tariffs, well, he might cover another fourth of that just by his budget cuts. So if we might even have a lower than 23% sales tax in the end when we really figure this out. But at the end of the day, the IRS is going to be pretty much stripped down to bare bones because you're going to have such a simple revenue collection system. You won't have any audits. You won't have any of those problems. And it's going to be more stable. The federal government will consistently be getting money as people spend money. I mean, yes, sometimes you go out and splurge and buy a TV, but majority of the time, you're just paying your regular expenses on a monthly basis. So if everybody's paying their regular expenses month to month, the federal government's going to stay stably funded, rather than a lot of people not paying any taxes until each quarter or even at the end of the year sometimes. There's a lot of false claims that this is a inequity issue, that we need progressive taxes where we tax the wealthy at 50% and take half of their income. But as we know, the middle class is the ones who get screwed on this. The so-called wealthy people, they don't pay taxes most years because, well, first of all, they have the means to hire the best tax accountants and lawyers that can find everything in the tax code that they can utilize to their benefit. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have low-income earners that do not pay any tax, or even lower to middle-class people who have enough deductions or children or whatever it may be that they pay little to no tax at all. So the middle to upper middle class are the ones who actually face most of the income tax burden in this country. They're the ones that fund most of the government, and those are the people who are contributing the most to society. Those are the mostly dual income, college educated, decent jobs that are actually creating value in the economy. And those are the people we are punishing the hardest with this income taxes. Another big opposition group is going to be that tax preparation lobby. They've changed laws, especially on the state level, but even on the federal level. These accountants, they have their lobby groups, and they go to the Capitol and they will lobby politicians to make sure that we keep the tax code complicated. We can't have it simpled down and dumbed down like every freaking country in this whole entire world. We have to have the most complex system so that not only billionaires and whatever, they can get their tax cuts out of it, but it's more so for the tax preparation industry, that they can scam us all every year out of a couple $100 or a lot more than that, depending on how complicated your situation is, and then they can make their money. A lot of that has already been alleviated with different online resources like TurboTax, TaxSlayer, a lot of those where you can sort of walk yourself through doing your own taxes. And a lot of people still believe in just doing their own taxes, and that's great. I fully encourage that. And I'm not against CPAs, but at any means. I mean, if it's worth it for you to pay somebody to do that and not have to worry about your time doing that, I totally support that. I've done it before. I just think that we don't need to have an entire industry that is based on an income tax that's not fair for anybody. Those IRS employees are going to be another huge group that is just going to come out in raging opposition to proposals like this. And the IRS, honestly, is a huge waste of taxpayer dollars. I mean, you would probably, the amount they spend is less than the amount they find in lost taxes or avoidant, whatever it may be. The IRS is just a giant, just money pit of throwing away our tax dollars to get more tax dollars. It doesn't make any sense. You need to strip it down, like I said, to bare bones, the absolute necessary people to count things up and make sure we got what we need. It does not need to be this massive sprawling agency where people go knocking down people's doors to audit them and take everything that they own because they didn't pay enough taxes. It's absolutely atrocious, and I have no sympathy for IRS employees whatsoever. I have some sympathies for the accountants. I mean, I don't think that CPAs are evil or bad, or that they don't create value in our current system. All I'm saying is that the right thing to do for our government today is to eliminate our current system, and unfortunately, that will eliminate the need for most of what accountants do today. These unnecessary costs that I keep bringing up, really what it comes down to is those costs are salaries. They're unnecessary jobs that are being paid out, whether it be government jobs or CPAs or whatever it may be. They're just going to be unnecessary in a fair sales tax-based system. I had on this guy on my podcast, it might have been almost a year ago now, Stephen Redden, that he talked about a fair tax system that was essentially a sales tax on every transaction. And, they've lobbied quite a bit to congressmen to enact something at least similar to that. The problem is you have income taxes codified into the U.S. Constitution, and it's going to take a massive act of Congress to eliminate all income taxes. And so that's why I see why Trump is doing what he's doing with this under 150,000. He's going to make a lot of people happy. And like I said, whether it's individual or household, we'll have to see what that means. But if it's an individual basis, I can see that most people probably don't make over 150,000 a year on an individual basis. So I can appreciate what Trump's doing. I hope it does not leave us with too many huge gaps in the revenue. I mean, I don't want to go into more debt on a national scale just so we have less taxes. I mean, that's just inflation waiting to happen. But I do agree with Trump's premise here and what he's going after. And I understand that as the president, he can't just sign a paper to eliminate income taxes. That's going to be a huge congressional act to amend the U.S. Constitution. But that's what needs to happen. So let's look at how this would work. I mean, so I just bought a new TV. I think it was about $350. If we go with that federal sales tax of about 23%, is what they're estimating would have to be to cover our costs today by eliminating the income tax system at the federal level. That $350 TV, I paid Iowa sales tax of 6%. That's $21. They have an extra 1% local sales tax in almost everywhere in the state. So your sales tax is actually 7%, but that 1% makes another $3.50. So for the $350 TV from Sam's Club, I paid $374.50. Now, my income was taxed at about 22% roughly. So if you call that $77 on 350, you compare that to a federal sales tax rather than a federal income tax of 23%. Now on 350, that's about $80. So about the same, for an average middle class guy to go buy a TV. It's going to be about the same if you paid your tax through your income or you paid your tax through the sales tax. So why change anything then if it's the same? Well, because no TV, no tax. If I hadn't bought that TV, I'd have saved myself $80. I could have invested or saved that money and not had to spend it. Problem is, the way we track our economy's well-being is just on our spending. That's pretty much the main metric that the United States uses anymore. It's just how much is everybody spending. We got to spend. More transactions. That means that the economy is good. Well, does it? I mean, consumer debt is just going sky high in the last several years since COVID. People are spending out of their minds. We need to encourage people to save and invest their money. It might not look the best on the GDP, but it's going to be what's best for Americans. And that's what we really care about, not some fictitious number of GDP. I care about how much does Joe and Sally down the street have in their savings account. Can they cover an emergency? Do they have enough invested for retirement so that they can actually support themselves and we don't have to continue a Social Security Ponzi scheme? That's what really matters. And what else matters is that in a sales tax situation, I have a choice. I don't have to pay taxes unless I choose to buy something. Versus today, I have to make as much money as I can at my job, and the more money I make, the more taxes I pay. But Trump doesn't stop there with these insanely ambitious and awesome goals. He also wants to end the Department of Education. Another thing that will probably take a massive act of Congress, as they're the ones who put it into effect in the first place in the 1970s. I recently made a blog post, if you want to go check that out, that went into a lot more detail about ending the department. But a lot of moves have been made lately with this new executive order that Trump signed to basically gut the whole thing. They're going to get rid of all non-essential services that the department provides. Secretary Linda McMahon said that these essential programs like student loans and grants for disabled or special needs children, all those things are going to continue. It's just these massive policy pushing down on state and local people that we're going to eliminate that. We don't need to be paying people to work against our interest of our children and our students. It's just totally backwards. Ultimately, Trump would like to see most of these essential functions of the department get outsourced to other departments, such as student loans going to the Department of the Treasury and stuff like that. They've already outsourced several different things to Department of Justice, like their Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education. A lot of things like that are just not essential to be part of our education system, and the federal government really needs to have no hand in it whatsoever. I do have to leave you with this, though. I do not hate teachers. I do not hate schools. I think that education is a very important thing. It's a great thing. We need to educate the next generation and train our students to be ready to go into the workforce and out into the world. I do have a problem with the federal government thinking that they know what's best for my local town and my local school district. I have a problem with teachers who sit around and whine about not making enough money while the rest of us are just barely scraping by too. You're not the only ones that work. You're not the only ones that have to put in extra hours for which they don't get paid. That's called being an adult and having a job. You get paid pretty well for only working 9 months out of the year compared to a lot of other people. Should we pay teachers a little bit more? Sure, let's have that conversation. But I'm not willing to have that conversation from a standpoint of you guys are so dramatically underpaid that it's not even funny. This is what you chose. You knew that that was the income levels that were out there for you when you went to go get your education degree. Life is all about choices. So don't blame me when all of a sudden you can't make it on the career path you chose. Like I said, I'm not against teachers. I've had wonderful teachers in my life. I've had some really, really horrible bad ones. Ones that absolutely scarred me from ever being willing to send my kids to a public school because of how terrible their teaching was, how hard they tried to indoctrinate us, the discrimination that I felt by just being a Christian. I'm not exaggerating here. I was viciously attacked for my Christian beliefs in public school in a very small town. But I also had some amazing teachers who were Christians, who may even ones that weren't Christians or I didn't even know, just ones that helped me along the way and really supported me and taught me and helped me in life. And without them, I would be nowhere. So I am really grateful for some teachers. But there again, there's good and bad to everything. And I cannot fully say that I support our public education system as it is today. Is there hope it can be fixed? Yes. And I really hope so. I hope that between Donald Trump's policies and policies that, like in Iowa with Kim Reynolds at the state level, what she's been doing, I even hope that our local school boards can continue to make better decisions. But what I've seen in my lifetime has not been good. And I just really hope we can turn that around. But that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week and stay conservative.